Stand for the gospel reading. We tend to think that meditation is an exotic Eastern practice that we somehow borrowed from Asia, from Hinduism and Buddhism, beginning in the late 1800s. But the truth is, you go right back into even the Old Testament, and meditation was part of the practice of mystical Judaism and in Christianity as well, except the terminology sometimes is different. Often where they use the word prayer, what that really means is meditation. When you see Jesus in prayer, it's not like he's going in front of the Father with a laundry list of I want, gimme, 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 but rather that he's operating out of the notion of the Father is in me and I am in the Father, which is the core of meditation. So for today's reading, I've assembled about 7 very short little brief passages, 2 from the Hebrew Scriptures and 5 from the New Testament, that speak of meditation, even if in the New Testament the word that's used frequently is prayer. From Psalm 19, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Psalm 77, I will meditate on all your work and muse on all your deeds. In 2 places in Luke's Gospel in chapter 2, we find Mary, the mother of Jesus, meditating. And this is how Luke puts it. Mary treasured all of these things, pondering on them in her heart. And that phrase is used in 2 different parts of chapter 2 of Luke's Gospel of Mary. Luke chapter 6, it was at this time that Jesus went off to the mountain to pray. And he spent the whole night in prayer to God. Another part of Luke chapter 5. But Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. And in Matthew's Gospel, after Jesus had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. And in Mark chapter 6, after bidding them farewell, he left for the mountain to pray. And in Mark chapter 1, in the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went away to a secluded place and was praying there alone. Words inspired by God. Tim Ferriss has had 2 best-selling books, according to the New York Times. He's a blogger. I had never heard of him. I had never heard of his books. But it seems that he's a very, very well-known blogger. For anybody who's into blogging, he has about something like 2 million followers. But I came across his second book, which is called Tribe of Mentors. And I'm reading that book at the moment. And what he actually did was he put together 11 questions that he wanted to ask of people in various fields, well-known people. And he sent it out to a few hundred people who are internationally known, very, very varied group, most of whom, I confess, I've never heard of in my life. Some of these were chefs, some of them were CEOs, some of them were venture capitalists, a few of them were world chess level champions, a few of them were world poker champions. There was dancers in it, ballet dancers, there were musicians in it, there were entrepreneurs in it, there were playwrights in it. And he sent out 11 questions and he said, can you please pick 3 or 5 of your favorite questions among these and respond to me and send them back to me? And 130 people sent it back, and that's the basis of his book. And some of the questions were stuff, so they were all asked the same questions. Some of the questions were like, what is your favorite book? What book do you frequently give to other people, as gifts? And the one that hit the top of the list actually was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He asked questions like, what was your most upsetting failure that resulted years down the line in a spectacular success? Another question was, what purchase of $100 or less in the last 6 months are you most happy with? There was a whole bunch of responses to that. But the one I'm primarily interested in was this. It said, what belief system or behavior or habit have you adopted in the last 5 years which has proved most satisfying and growth inspiring for you? And the one that hit the top of the list, I was shocked. They were talking about poker players, chess champions, dancers, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists. And the one that hit place number 1 was a practice of meditation. A lot of people have discovered it because it's not just a spiritual exercise, it improves people's physical health, emotional health, mental health, and social health. So I decided I wanted to talk about meditation today. And I'm just going to make 3 main points this morning. Firstly, I'll make some general remarks about meditation. And then secondly, I want to focus in on, there are basically 2 great forms of meditation when I talk about those. And then thirdly, I'm just going to take 4 examples of specific meditation styles and just go through them quickly with us. So the first one, just a few general remarks. So how do we differentiate, how do you define what meditation is? So my big belief system is that God is totally ineffable. Literally, there is no way we can describe God. So we can experience God, and we all do experience God, but in order to put that into words, we lose the meaning of it. So God is basically an inarticulatable mystery, whom we can experience, but whom we cannot express in words. So there's that aspect of God, which is totally beyond human comprehension, but not beyond human experience. So that is called very often the transcendence of God, that which is beyond understanding. But there's a second aspect of God, and that is God as she reveals herself through her creation or through manifestation of various kinds. So you can't look at a sunset or climb a mountain, or visit in the desert or watch a little baby being born without being fascinated. So here's God. This is called the immanence of God. God as she reveals herself through her creation. So there are these 2 great aspects of God that we can all experience. Now, my own personal definition of prayer is that prayer is when the immanence of God establishes a communication or a dialogue with the transcendence of God. So it's God in nature, as human beings or elsewhere, attempting to forge a communication with the transcendence, the mystery of God. That would be prayer. So in prayer, we initiate the dialogue. We are the talkers. In meditation, it is the transcendence initiating a communication with the immanence of God. So in meditation, we are meant to be the listeners. Now, you know that, relationships come in various guises. So a relationship in which neither party ever talks to the other is not a really good relationship. It's not going to go anywhere. But there are some people, and that's the kind of relationship they have with friends or spouses or children or whatever, they never talk to each other anymore. Obviously, that's not going to build togetherness. Then there's a second kind of relationship where one party does all the talking and the other one is meant to do all the listening. Familiar to anybody? I'm not going to make a remark on it. And then there's a third kind of relationship where both parties talk and listen to each other. They take turns talking and listening. So that's the kind of the dance between prayer and meditation. So prayer is where we do the talking and God does the listening. And meditation is where God does the talking and we do the listening. So that would be my kind of just quick down and dirty definition of the difference between prayer and meditation. So in these passages that I read for you, the prayer of Jesus is not, Jesus bending God's ear and saying, gimme, 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 gimme. I got this long list of stuff I want. It's Jesus understanding, I am the Father are one. The Father is in me and I am in the Father. That's the essence of meditation. The realization that it's the immanence of God within you speaking to the transcendence of God outside of you. So that would be the first thing, my definition of it. What is the purpose then of meditation? And basically, if I were to put it in one sentence, the purpose of all meditation is to disidentify with the separated self. To disidentify with the notion of me as distinct from you or from everybody else. And to begin re-identifying with higher and higher self-images. So it looks like this to me. That firstly, as we begin to kind of get rid of our ego, not in the sense that we abandon it because we need it in order to operate in the physical world, but we don't identify with it anymore. As we begin to get rid of it, we begin to recognize the works of God all around us. That's the first stage of kind of the disidentification and the re-identification with higher stages. We begin to recognize the works of God all around us. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is we begin to recognize God in her works. So it's not just the works themselves, but we recognize God in her works or in her creation. Stage 3 is we begin looking at this stuff through the eyes of God. It's like we're putting on the mind of Christ and we're looking out through Christ's eyes or through God's eyes and we're looking at her works with God's own eyes. And then the fourth stage is realize there is only God. We are characters in God's dream. We are, the way in which God experiences, creation. So they're the 4 stages of disidentifying. Just this morning as I was coming down in the car, I suddenly got this notion that when Christ said very famously, the only commandment is, he reduces 613 precepts of Torah down to one commandment, a commandment to love. He said, you love the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole soul and your whole mind. And then the second one he says, you love your neighbor as yourself. And up to this morning, I would have thought that when he said, you must love your neighbor as yourself, so Marilyn is my neighbor, I love myself, and now I have to try to love Marilyn in the same way that I love myself. But that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying, pretend like, you can love her as much as you love yourself. That's what you're supposed to do. He's not saying that. When you really get meditation, you realize that Marilyn is myself. Marilyn is another character that God is playing, and there is only God. And so it's like, in some senses, if I'm right-handed and I do everything with my right hand, and suddenly I decide I'm going to give a piece of food to my left hand so I can put it into my mouth, like I'm somehow now favoring my left hand is me as much as my right hand is me. Marilyn is me as much as Seán is me. So it's not love your neighbor, in the same way that you're loving yourself, but as Marilyn is me. Love yourself as Marilyn, or love Marilyn as yourself. She is yourself. And so that's what happens in deep meditation, that you go through the stages of realizing, firstly, you're looking at the works of God, and then you're seeing God in her works, and then you're looking through the eyes of God at her works, and then finally you realize you are God. There is only God, and you are a character that God is playing. So that's the whole purpose of meditation, is to try to get into that space where you're looking and experiencing yourself as God. And then there are no distinctions between us. So what are some just simple little tips then? Or if you want to take up a practice of meditation, I recommend experimenting. Firstly, with the time of the day. We're different creatures. Some of us are morning people, some of us are night people. And so figure out at what stage of the day, if you devote even 20 minutes to it, can you be relaxed and alert? You have to have both. If you're too relaxed, you're going to fall asleep. If you're too alert, your mind is racing and you can't meditate. So at what time of the day for you, experiment with it, are you able to be relaxed and alert at the same time? Secondly, experiment with, your body posture. You don't have to sit, cross-legged in a lotus position. If you can do that, fine. You don't have to sit zazen, If you can do that, great. You can meditate sitting down. You can meditate lying down. You can meditate kneeling down, like you were taught as a Catholic kid. You can meditate standing up. As long as the spine is straight, as long as your body isn't uncomfortable, as long as you can adopt a position for a period of time where your body isn't going to kind of complain. So experiment with your body position to find what works for you. Thirdly, experiment with the place that you're meditating. Some people want to go into the forest to meditate. Some people are going to climb a mountaintop. Some people are going to go to the ocean. Some people can have a little place in their room. So figure out what space is sacred for you in which you can, meditate most frequently. And then fourthly, I would say, experiment with the style of meditation. There are hundreds of different kinds of meditation. Some may suit you and some may not suit you. Experiment until you find the one that works for you, and then stay with that. But since it is a relationship is predicated on constant communication. And therefore, you'll get more benefit from doing even 10 minutes a day, every day, rather than doing it once a week for an hour and a half. So the constancy of the connection is really, really important. So there were just kind of some general remarks about starting meditation. There are hundreds of different schools of meditation, lots and lots and lots of ways in which you can do it. But they basically boil down into two great schools. One is called concentration-type meditation, and the other is called awareness-type meditation. So concentration-type meditation is a very, very narrow focus. It's like you put something under a microscope and you're seeing right down to the atomic structure of it. Whereas mindfulness or awareness meditation is more like a radar, which is scanning the entire environment, both the internal environment and the external environment. So concentration meditation might be something like focusing on a physical object. Like, for instance, you might go into your bedroom, turn off all the lights, maybe burn some incense and light a candle, and you're focused just totally on the flame of the candle. So you could focus on a physical object, or you could focus on a phrase or a word, like Om, a mantra, repeating a word, or the Jesus prayer, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, remember me. So it's an ancient Jesus prayer. You could focus on that statement. Or you could focus on a physiological process, like your breathing. So you just, count your breath, or try to distinguish, what happens between the in-breath in your nostril and the out-breath. Is there a difference in temperature between the two of them? So a physiological process. So it's focusing on it. And in concentration meditation, there are basically 3 stages that you are going to go through. And they're called concentration, contemplation, and identification. So concentration is, imagine now you're in a dark room with a candle burning in front of you, and you're totally focused on this candle. And so initially, there is me focusing on the candle flame. The second stage is called contemplation. It's almost as if the atomic, structure of the candle and my atomic structure have melted into each other, and they're literally commingling. And I find a part of myself saying, I and the candle are one. Just like Jesus would say, I and the Father are one. That's the second stage, is called contemplation. But at this stage, there's still an observer making that statement, I and the candle are one. So the third stage is total identification. You and the candle are one, and there's nobody left to make the comment. That will be the third stage of deep concentration meditation. So that's kind of basically what the concentration type meditations, and there are hundreds of schools of them, but they all basically teach the same thing. Awareness meditation then, or mindfulness meditation, is like a radar which is scanning the entire environment. It's not a narrow focus, it's scanning the entire environment, both the internal environment, inside yourself, and the external environment. And the object of this is, it's about observation, not interpretation. You're not going to interpret what you're experiencing, you're just going to experience it per se. So it's the difference between seeing things, as you are, and seeing things as they are, without any interpretation whatsoever. You're just allowing them to address you without any kind of filtration system going on. So even when the experiences are coming from the inside out and you're experiencing some internal state, you're not judging them or you're not interpreting them, you're merely observing them and witnessing them. So the example I use to illustrate this is, imagine you're sitting in a long, narrow room. And there are no windows or doors in this room, except at the very end wall, there's a small window to the outside. And there's a circus passing by outside the window. And now you can see the neck of the giraffe engages the frame of the window, and it passes by. And now there's an elephant passing by, and you can see it in the frame of the window. And now there's a cage full of lions passing by, and you can see those. And now there's a bunch of clowns passing by, and you can see those. And all you do is while they're engaged in the frame of the window, you watch them, tag them, lions, zebra, clowns, whatever, and then you let them go. You do not run up to the beginning of the room, stick your head out to the window and say, I wonder what happened to the lions. You don't try to do that. You just watch what's happening, tag it, let go of it, watch it, tag it, let go of it. So that would be kind of mindfulness meditation. And the objective of that is to try to bring all experiences to full consciousness or full awareness, because we live at a subconscious or a non-conscious level so often. How often have you taken a journey of 90 miles and you have no idea what happened in the interim? You were thinking, or you were dreaming, or you were listening to the radio, and you've passed 1 million cars and 40 different intersections. You have no idea what happened. You're doing it all automatically. So mindfulness meditation is about trying to live life with as much awareness as possible. Now, there's actually huge differences between these two kinds of meditation. And I remember one time reading about this great experiment where they took groups of meditators, yogis trained in the concentration type, and Zen Buddhist monks and nuns who were trained in the awareness or the mindfulness. And they rigged them up with electroencephalograms, so there's electrodes on their brain, and they're watching what happens as they meditate. Now, if you're a yogi and you're practicing concentration meditation, so Marilyn is a yogini, she's an adept at concentration meditation. She's got her eyes closed, she's focused on a mantra. We've got electrodes on her head, we're scanning her brain, and all of a sudden I come up behind her and I go, there'll be no blink, literally. Now, it's not like she's pretending she didn't hear it. If you look at the electroencephalogram, it did not get recorded. The brain did not record. You could flash a lamp in her eyes, you could make noises behind her head. She's so focused that even the brain won't register that there was a stimulus. Now, that's the level of kind of concentration that these people adapt. You do that with a Zen Buddhist monk. And so we say Mary Kate is a Zen Buddhist monk, nun. We put the electrodes on her head. Now, she's trained to literally scan the environment constantly. So she's in deep meditation, and I go up here and I go, and all of a sudden her brain spikes. Now, if she's not a good meditator, and I do that 20 times, the 21st time her brain won't even register it. She'll habituate to the noise because it's coming regularly. So she's habituated, her brain won't register it anymore. But if she is a Zen Buddhist adept, I can do it 1,000 times, and each time her brain will register the impulse because she's scanning the environment constantly. Her idea is to be totally aware constantly of everything that's happening internally and externally. So huge differences between the two systems. It's not that one is better than the other, it's that there are two different ways of trying to get in touch with ultimate reality, what it really is. So there'd be kind of the difference then between the two great systems. So my third point then, I want to just focus on, I want to give you 4 examples of 4 different styles. So I look at a shamanistic style of meditation, at a Hindu style of meditation, at a Buddhist style of meditation, and at a Christian style of meditation. Now, shamanism is the oldest spirituality on the planet. It goes back at least 40,000 years, judging by cave art. And so the shamans believed that there were 3 levels to reality. There's an upper world, there's a middle world, and there's a lower world. The upper world are the place of the good spirits. The middle world is the place where humans hang out and nature is. And then the lower world is a place of darkness and illness and sickness. And the shaman is trained to be able to move between these 3 levels, particularly if somebody's soul has been captured through an illness some way, that they can go down to the underworld and resurrect or heal that soul and visit with the spirit beings in the third world. So they use many, many different techniques to do this. So they'll use drumming typically, they use dancing, they use a mantra, chanting kinds of stuff, they'll use fasting, they'll use plant medicine like entheogens like peyote or ayahuasca, they'll use inflicting pain on their bodies in order to change their states of consciousness. So they have many, many different techniques. But basically, whenever you study shamanism, you realize that 4 is the sacred number in shamanism. Everything happens in groups of 4. And so there's 4 different kinds of meditation among the shamanistic cultures. There's lying meditation, you're lying on your back. There's sitting meditation, there's standing meditation, and there's walking meditation, representing the 4 stages of early childhood development. We start off just lying on our backs, we can't even roll over in our bellies. And then at some stage we learn to sit upright. And then at some stage we stand upright, and then at some stage we begin to walk. So there are 4 different kinds of meditation then for the shamans. So the lying meditation, this is kind of the vocation of the healer. And the modality for the lying meditation is total silence. So the style of meditation is lying meditation, the vocation is the healer, and the modality is silence. The second kind of meditation is sitting meditation, and the vocation is the vocation of the teacher, and the modality is storytelling. The third stage, third kind of meditation in shamanistic cultures is standing meditation, and the vocation is to be the warrior, and the modality is dance. And then the fourth kind of meditation is walking meditation, and the vocation is the visionary, and the medium is song and music. So when you go into the shamanistic cultures, these are the modalities and these are the vocations, that you're going through. So that's very simple. So every one of us experiences, if I were to say to you, do you consider yourself to be, a healer, a teacher, a warrior, or a visionary? Which do you think you are? You're probably a bit of both, of all 4. At some stage in your life, going into one of these modalities. So then you can pick up a meditation which is appropriate. I want to develop the warrior in me, for this month or this week or this year or whatever. Or I want to develop the teacher in me, or the healer in me, or the visionary in me. Then if you were in a shamanistic culture, they'd say, okay, you want to be a warrior, you do a standing meditation, standing and dancing, and get yourself into a trance to kind of gear yourself up for whatever battle you're experiencing, whether it's an internal battle or a relationship issue or contending with the world, whatever it is. You want to be a visionary, you need to do a walking meditation, and this walking meditation, you have to be singing when you're doing it. You sing the meditation. So it's a really great way of saying, what do I want to develop in myself, this week or this month? Do I want to be the healer, the visionary, the teacher, or the warrior? Then pick the appropriate meditation for yourself in the shamanistic system. So that would be shamanism. Hinduism, probably no culture has put as much energy and effort into understanding the human psyche, I think, as Hinduism has. And they have so many, many different kinds of meditation. So according to Hinduism, the number 4 is important in Hinduism as well. So there are 4 great paths to God, according to Hinduism. They call them the 4 yogas. So the first yoga was the Jnana Yoga, which is the path of the mind. They say there are some people for whom the mind is a radically transformative organ. It's not just a place where we're kind of, titillated by new ideas, but a place where we're transformed by the ideas we entertain. And these would be, if you don't mind me mixing the cultures, these would be the kind of the Thomas Aquinas of the world, people who are literally transformed by the thoughts they entertain and manipulate intracranially. So that's one path. In fact, Hinduism says that's actually the fastest path of all, but the steepest. The second path they call Bhakti Yoga, and it's the path of the heart. It is people who have a love affair with God, people who express it through some kind of devotional activity. And again, maybe a character like Francis of Assisi would be the typical Bhakti yogi. They find God, they have a love affair with God. The third path they call Karmic Yoga, and this is the path of social justice or right action. These are people who want to make a difference in the world and really want to make sure that people aren't suffering unnecessarily. And these would be like the Mother Teresas of the world who dedicate their lives to making a difference for the little people or the marginalized people. And then the fourth kind of path they call Raja Yoga, which is the path of psychological experimentation or meditation. By going deeply, deeply in, you discover the divine inside. And there would be people like maybe Teresa of Avila, the great, great mystics. So this last piece then is their meditation style. And there are many, many meditation styles in Hinduism. But I'm going to give just a very, very simple one this morning, the simplest of all. And it's called Shavasana. And Shavasana just literally means the death pose. It's a very simple meditation where you just lie on your back on a firm surface on the ground, probably, with your legs splayed slightly and your hands at your side, palms upward. And you literally just focus on your breathing. So it's a concentration meditation focused just on your breath. So you can either just watch what happens to your chest as you breathe in and out, or what happens to your abdomen as you breathe in or out, or the difference in temperature, or am I favoring one nostril over the other? Am I tending to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth? Or am I a mouth breather? Or if I close my mouth, can I breathe in through one nostril? Can I breathe in through my right nostril and just take the air into my left lung? Or could I breathe into my left nostril and take the air into both lungs? So playing around with what happens to the breathing as I focus on the nostril or on the lung. So it's a focused kind of meditation, a very, very simple kind of one. The third example I want to use then is a Buddhist meditation. And the Buddhists in general very much favor the mindfulness and awareness style over the concentration style. So most Buddhist cultures, whether it's in Asia and wherever you find it in the States, they'll focus much more on mindfulness or awareness meditation. So another word for that is kind of vipassana. So vipassana meditation is where you're really trying to scan the environment, the internal environment and the external environment. You're trying to understand life on its own terms without imposing any kind of interpretation or an overlay on it, just allowing the data to address you, trying to see life as it is rather than just seeing life through particular kinds of filters. So for instance, if you were to do a 10-day Vipassana retreat, typically they'll divide it into 5 segments of 2 days. And for the first 2 days, they will teach you how to scan your own breathing and try to understand breathing on its own terms, not making any interpretations of it, but just looking at all the different facets of what happens to your body physiologically as you breathe. Just watch what happens, experience your breathing without any interpretation whatsoever. The next 2 days, they'll focus on your sensations. Your eyes, what information are your eyes giving you, your ears giving you, your sense of touch and taste and smell. So you focus on the 5 senses for the next 2 days, and you will let all the information come through these senses without any judgment whatsoever or any interpretation, and just try to experience them as you're experiencing them. The third set of 2 days, they'll focus on emotions. What emotions are you experiencing, in the course of this meditation retreat? Again, without any judgment or interpretation. What does fear feel like? What does anger feel like? What does depression feel like? You just experience them on their own terms. The fourth set of 2 days, they'll focus on your ideation, your thought processes. What kinds of ideas come into your mind? Again, without any judgment whatsoever, what's it like to experience particular kinds of thoughts? And then the last section of 2 days, it would be the entire thing. Let everything come at you, and then try to experience it without interpreting it. So to use another image, it's like you're sitting on the banks of a river, and what it wants you to do is, look at the river, but don't get distracted by the contents of the river. Don't try to see what happened to that fish as it went downstream, or what happened to that piece of a twig of a tree or this leaf of a tree, and try to follow it down around the next corner. Just watch it as it's passing you. Something else comes into view, watch that. So watch the river rather than watching the contents of the river. Don't get stuck or distracted by the contents. So that would be typically a kind of a Vipassana retreat or Vipassana meditation. And the last kind I want to focus on then will be Christian meditation. And as I said at the beginning, we have this notion that, Christianity just very, very laterally adopted these exotic Asian practices called meditation. Not true. As I showed in the readings that I picked this morning, you find it in the Hebrew scriptures, the notion of meditation, way back in the Psalms. You find it in the life of Christ, that again and again and again, he goes out to be alone. The word they use is prayer, but it is not prayer in the sense of asking for stuff. It's prayer in the sense of being able to say, I and the Father are one. Total identification with Source. I showed you that Mary in Luke's Gospel in 2 different places in deep, deep meditation, trying to make sense of her experiences of her son, her child. There's a great story in the Acts of the Apostles in chapter 10, where St. Peter, is in a deep meditation that literally changed his life and changed the Jesus movement. He has a vision in a deep meditation where a sheet is left down from heaven with all kinds of animals inside in it. And a voice says to him, Peter, take, eat, kill and eat. And Peter says, God forbid, I've never eaten anything treif in my life. I keep kosher. And the sheet is taken up. It comes down a second time, and the same animals are inside in it, and he's given the same injunction, take and eat. And Peter says, I keep kosher. It happens a third time, and finally the voice says to him, don't call anything I have eaten, call anything that I have created unclean. And Peter realized he was talking to him, God was talking about the Gentiles. That this Jesus movement was not something that was just meant for the Hebrews, or for the people of Judea or Galilee. It was meant for the whole world. Not that we baptize everybody in order to make Christians of them, but that we invite everybody to wake up to the Christ consciousness within themselves, And so it totally changed Peter's life, and it changed the whole Jesus movement, a meditation experience he had. And so this is an old practice within Christianity. And in fact, when you trace it historically, and you look at, beginning with the Desert Fathers in the 3rd century, people like Anthony of the Desert Fathers and the Desert Mothers, who spent lifetimes literally living alone, meditating on God. So it's an old practice. You look at, there's a whole school of great Italian mystics, beginning maybe with Benedict in the 6th century, who invented the Lectio Divina, meditating on the Word of God. Then you had people like Dominic, who gave us the Rosary. And the Rosary is a very, very powerful meditation tool. And there are 3 ways of making a Rosary a meditation. But the repetition of the Hail Mary and the Our Father and the Glory be to the Father is actually a mantra. It's an extended mantra. So you literally just get into the space of repeating the same phrase again and again and again, and it leads you into an altered state of consciousness. Or you can use the Rosary by, focusing on the particular mysteries. So today is a Sunday. It's the glorious mysteries. So the resurrection, ascension, descent of the Holy Spirit, assumption of Mary into heaven, coronation of Mary. You can focus on each of these 5 different mysteries, as you said, the Rosary, and that's another form of meditation. Or you could take the individual prayers, like the Hail Mary, and begin to parse it as you're going through it. And make that a meditation, trying to really get in contact with what it means to be told, I have chosen you to be the Mother of God, because every single one of us has been chosen to be the Mother of God. So St. Dominic in the 1200s gave us this beautiful meditation called the Rosary. Around the same time we had St. Francis, and Francis gave us the ability to meditate on nature. This fascination he had with, sun and moon and stars and animals of various kinds. So he brought meditation out of nature. And then you had the great German mystics. You had people like, for instance, Hildegard von Bingen in the 1100s. And in the 1200s, you had another great mystic called Mechtilde of Magdeburg, an extraordinary woman. And then in the 1300s, you had maybe the greatest of them all. You had Meister Eckhart. So there was the great German school of mystics and meditators. And then there were followed later on by the great Spanish mystics. So beginning with Ignatius of Loyola, who was born in 1491. And then you had Teresa of Avila, who died about 1580, and John of the Cross, who died just a few years later. So you've got the great Spanish mystics, meditators. So there's this long history of Christian meditation. It kind of got lost during the Reformation, but we've revived it again. So the final point I want to make then is, I want to just take one Christian meditation, the one I was initially trained in the seminary, called the Ignatian Method by St. Ignatius of Loyola, and just go through it very, very, very simply. So Ignatius of Loyola invented a system where he wanted to involve all parts of the human person in the meditation. So a typical meditation was, you would take a story from the Bible. So for instance, let's say Christ feeding the 5,000 people with the loaves and fishes. And so you're going to use that as your meditation. So you would take it first and you would read the story in the gospel account until you familiarize yourself with it. So now you're using your intelligence to kind of grok the story. And then when you think you have it, you close the book and you tell yourself the story. Now you're involving your memory. Can you remember the details of the story? Can you tell it to yourself in the meditation? That would be the stage 2. Stage 3 is you activate your imagination. Now, I've said to you many times that imagination is not a faculty that allows you to make up stuff which is not real. That's fantasy. That's not imagination. Imagination is the ability to volitionally change your state of consciousness, enter into a different dimension, interact with energies and entities that reside there, learn from them and bring that learning back into this waking consciousness. That's imagination. So Ignatius was very keen that you use your imagination and you activate all 5 inner senses. So let's say it's the story of Christ feeding the 5,000. You want to see what's happening. You want to hear the voices. You want to taste the bread and the fish. You want to smell what's it like. I mean, is the fish gone off or is it fresh fish? You want to kind of feel, are you wearing sandals yourself? What kind of clothes are you wearing? When you touch the bread, what does it feel like? So you activate all 5 inner senses. Then the next stage, Ignatius said, is you want to look at what's happening to you emotionally. When you're having this experience, all your senses are activated. You're seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, and smelling what's happening. What are you feeling? Are you feeling happiness? Are you confused by what's happening? What emotions are you experiencing? And then you activate your intellect again. You want to start asking questions. You want to try to figure out what's happening here. So maybe you're going to approach one of the characters. Maybe Jean is there, and Jean is the little boy, who had the loaves and fishes. And I said to Jean, what's your mommy going to say when you go home? Just a few fish heads, and a few scraps. She's going to be really annoyed with you. What's going to happen? All right, maybe you said to Peter, I'd really like to get a word with this guy, Jesus. Any chance you could kind of put a word in edgeways for me? What do you want to ask, of the situation? And if you ask a question, you have to wait for a response. Don't just keep asking questions. Ignatius says, then stop. Listen for an answer. What wisdom is coming back to you? And then you're grateful. You say an act of gratitude towards the end of the meditation for the experience you've had. And then the final piece is write it down. Because you build up, kind of a whole glossary of experiences, and you're in contact with the divine at a much, much deeper level. So the genius of Ignatius was that he activated all of the faculties of what it means to be human. Because if they're all activated, nothing is left to distract you. I sometimes use an example to illustrate this. When I was growing up as a little kid, 2 of my sisters, Ethna and Deirdre, were very close in age. Deirdre was born in 1949, September 49, and Ethna was born in August 51. There's only 2 years between them, but they're very close. But they're totally different characters. Deirdre was very domesticated. My mother was a seamstress, so Deirdre was able to make her own clothes, knit her own garments and whatever, very domesticated. Ethna was a real tomboy, wanted to be out playing hurling and football with the guys. But they had a friend called June Crowley, and June was born in 1950, right between the 2 of them. So they were both great friends with June Crowley. And she was having a birthday party to which both were invited. Now, Deirdre had just made herself 3 lovely dresses. I'm going to say a red one, a white one, and a blue one. So she dressed up in one of them, and she's about to go off to the party. And then she realizes, whatever dresses I don't wear, Etna's going to wear until I'm gone, and she's going to pick one of the others. She never made stuff for herself, but she had no problem about you looking pretty. She was a very, very pretty girl. So there was only one way that Deirdre could be sure that Etna wouldn't pitch up at the party wearing one of Deirdre's dresses. She wore all three, one on top of the other. She went around like a balloon. That way Etna couldn't use any of the dresses. Now that was the genius of Ignatius of Loyola. If you employ all of the faculties, your physical body, your intellect, your emotions, your senses, you employ all these things, there's nothing left to distract you. So you can have a real powerful meditation. I'll finish up with this statement. There are extraordinary changes, transformative changes that we've all seen kids go through. We've done it ourselves as kids. So around 8 months, the ego develops. A child recognizes when somebody says, Seán, that's me. Yeah? About age 8 months. About age a year, we learn to stand upright. We're Homo erectus. We began walking around. Around age 2, we become Homo sapiens. We learn how to speak. Around age 7, we become Homo sapiens sapiens. We learn how to be rational, in ourselves. Around age 12, we're physically complete in a sense, and we're able to self-reflect. So about age 15 or 16, we pretty much stop growing. There are no huge, significant growth spurts after that. Psychologically, physiologically, in any way. We pretty much stop growing. People have tried lots and lots of ways of trying to continue to allow us to evolve as dramatically in the next course of our life as we did in the first 15 or 16 years. They've tried all kinds of things to say, can we keep that process going, this evolutionary trajectory, where either physiologically or intellectually or emotionally or spiritually we can continue to evolve. Nothing works. Nothing works, that can be demonstrated in any testing except, and you've guessed it at this stage, a practice of meditation. It's the only thing that's been seen in developmental psychology where a practice of meditation somehow continues the evolutionary trajectory. Maybe you're not going to get, there will be physical benefits to it. There'll be psychological benefits to it. There'll be emotional benefits to it. There'll be sociological benefits to us. Literally, peace breaks out when people are meditating together. And obviously, spiritual development as well. So if there's any single practice that allows you to evolve as dramatically in your 50s and 60s and 70s as you did in your pre-teen years and teen years, that practice is meditation. Ingrid.
I have to start off by saying I'm not a very good meditator, but you did inspire me.
Okay.
Did you ever see that documentary, Doing Time, Doing Vipassana?
No.
It's fascinating. It was in India, and they had a lot of recidivism rates of people coming back committing same crimes, and they were sort of just on that track. And then I forget who was the inspirer, but they did that 10-day silent Vipassana training. But before they could do it on the prisoners, they did it on the guards, because they had to be in that equilibrium of complete awareness, openness, and sensitivity. And it was highly successful, and they tried to bring it into the United States, but that really blew my mind, that Doing Time, Doing Vipassana. Now, I joined a few meetup groups, and if anybody needs, by the way, we have an insight meditation that does that.
Vipassana.
And it's open every day of the week in Redwood City, and I think they have some others in other areas. But I joined some meetup groups, and I could not believe how many meditation groups are out there. All different kinds, all different places. And so that's another support system if you want to get a practice going. I'm mainly saying that to myself right now.
Brilliant. Brilliant, Ingrid, brilliant. It reminds me of the fact that the TM meditators set up a series of experiments in the 70s and 80s and 90s trying to see if having meditators in a physical area would reduce the crime rate. So they did one particular experiment where they took 48 American cities and they divided them into two groups, a control group of 24 cities and an experimental group of 24 cities that were matched demographically for all the correlates of crime. Typically, most crime is done by males between the ages of 15 and 24 who are not very highly educated, who come from impoverished circumstances. So they matched the two groups of 24 cities for those kind of demographics. And in one group, they brought in a bunch of meditators, and so for a period of time. And they predicted that the crime rates would be very, very different. Now, so the data that are being generated, it's not stuff they're making up themselves. These are from police records. Anybody can check it. And over the course of the year, the crime rate in the control cities in which there were no meditators went up by 16%, which is actually the national average in America for that year. The crime rate in the experimental cities where there were meditators went down by 16%. So there was a 32% differential in the crime rate for that year from publicly available statistics. So they created a formula that if you could get the square root of 1% of a population meditating together in the same physical space, you can radically affect the quality of life. And they did it twice. Once in the Maharishi International University in Iowa, and once in a location in Holland. This is going back into the 80s, when the population was about 6.5 billion people. Now, the interesting thing is, the square root of 1% of 6.5 billion people is less than 8,000 human beings. You take the square root of 1% of the world population. Today, our world population is about 7.5 billion. The square root of 1% of 7.5 billion, I just checked out the math last night for myself, is 8,700 people. If you've got 8,700 people in the same physical location at the same time, meditating for peace, peace breaks out. They did this twice, and what they did, they looked at what's called content analysis, where you take the major world newspapers and you look at the reporting of, crime and international incidents and terrorist attacks and stuff like that, and you can calculate whether, violence is on the increase or the decrease. And on 2 occasions over a week-long period, first in Iowa and once in Holland, they brought over 8,000 people together meditating, and then looking at the newspapers for the following week, the whole crime rate and international violence rate went down. So we literally can, you're absolutely right. This is not just true intrapsychically or psychologically or spiritually, it's true literally sociologically. So even bringing groups together to meditate in a place, literally the ripples of peace and love go out and affect everybody else. Margaret and then Jeannie.
I just have a question. Do you have to be in one place?
How do you mean now?
Do the meditators have to be physically all together?
Okay, right. So there are two formulas if you want to be mathematical about it. If individuals are meditating in discrete locations, then they have an effect, but the effect is dramatically different if they're meditating in the same physical location. And the reason for it seems to me is this. We literally send out brain waves, literally. If you put an electroencephalogram on somebody, there's literally ripples that go out. If people are meditating together, then if we're meditating in sync, the amplitude of the wave doubles. It's like if you take, you know what a sine wave is? If you draw a sine wave, it's this kind of curve. If you take 2 sine waves and you put them together and they match precisely, that they're peaking, when each is peaking at the same time and troughing at the same time, what happens is the amplitude of the wave increases twofold, it's twice as big. If they're out of sync, they mess each other up. If they're completely out of sync, if one is at the lowest point, when the other is the highest point, they cancel each other, you flatline. And so literally, if you've got a group of people in the same space, physically together, meditating, literally the brainwave activity is synchronized and the amplitude is huge. So if you get them together, the square root of 1% of the population will do what typically, a much bigger population is necessary if they're physically separated from each other. Yeah. And Jean was next.
If you're meditating on your breath,
Yes.
is that mindfulness? Is that mindfulness?
Okay. It's an
example you gave me was mindfulness.
Okay, no. Meditating on any one single focus is concentration. So that would be concentration type meditation. If you're listening to what your breath is doing and you're looking at every aspect of your breath and you're letting it with no kind of interpretation whatsoever, you're just letting it come through you, observing it, that would be more mindful. But then in typical mindful meditation, you're letting everything else address you as well. It's a radar. You're scanning the entire environment. So you're not just listening to your breath, you're listening to your body, you're listening to your senses, you're listening to the noises. So mindfulness is a much wider radar than concentration meditation, just focus on one specific thing, like the breathing.
Concentrating on your breathing, but one is more expanded, right?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
thank you.
Right, yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I've been in various meditation groups over the years, and I just thought I'd add a few things. First group I got in was TM. Oh, in each different groups I've been in, I noticed that each one has a strong aspect to it and a weak aspect.
Absolutely.
And there was never one group that had it all together. But in TM, they were very scientific.
Mm-hmm.
and they came up with some interesting stuff. The thing that stuck in my mind was the regularity of meditating, and they found that if you meditated once a day for 20 minutes, you got 10% of the value of that. If you meditated twice a day, you got 100%. So it's important to get that rhythm going. Moving along, there was a study, a small study at the University of Benares. Many years ago, they were trying to check out which meditation was the best. And they found that TM was good, they found that Kriya was good, but they found Vipassana was the best. There's several different types of Vipassana, but they didn't distinguish which is which. I've been procrastinating. I want to call in Consumer Reports and have them do a thorough study on all this, so we don't have to kind of experiment around. And I occasionally go up to the center in Redwood City, the IMC Center, Insight Meditation Center, and they advocate mindfulness, but they don't get too specific. And what they're talking about is mindfulness basically is just being alert, walking along and being alert to what's out there. And I find there's actually 3 different kinds of mindfulness. And what I do is, and all of them, I find the most efficient way of doing it is walking. And walking at night, because there's fewer distractions. So I do the part of the one where I'm alert and looking at other things and keeping my mind from chattering. And the second type is really powerful, it's therapeutic, and that is you watch how you're thinking. You watch your emotions. And Werner Erhard had it right when he said, when you thoroughly experience your emotions, they disappear. And it's amazing what you can get rid of just by doing that, just watching your emotions. And you have to do it as a scientist. You can't get involved with a story. The story may bring on the emotions, but then you leave the story behind and you watch it like a scientist, disengaged. And that's very effective. And the third type of mindfulness is when you're just walking along and you're in tune with everything. Call it God. You're just in tune with what's there and not focusing on any one particular thing. And so that's interesting. So I think, I try to take a 2-mile walk every night and get it all in, and I expect to be enlightened by next Tuesday.
Great contribution, Chris, great contribution. Yeah, what you said is right on. I would add a few things to it, which is that in some senses, we have to first establish, if you're going to work as a scientist, you have to establish what your criteria for successful look like. So if success is, for instance, that there's less anxiety in my life, one style may work. If, my criterion is that I want to be physically healthy, maybe another style is going to work. If my interest is in, relationships, interpersonal relationships, maybe another style is better. So I have to look at what criteria are going to establish what's better than something else. Now, the Vipassana and all of the Buddhist meditations, since Buddhism is not a religion, they never pretend to be a religion. It's maybe an extraordinary ability to understand the human psyche and to not be thrown by interpretations or storylines. They're excellent at doing that. But if you were interested in spirituality per se, or establish some kind of connection with Source, then Vipassana is not going to take you there. It's going to take you into awareness, pure awareness. Now, if you say pure awareness is God, then that's fine. But if you're interested in a more kind of a personal connection between the immanence of God and the transcendence of God, my experience is that Vipassana was not going to take you into that space. It'll take you into a place of full awareness and realization that we are awareness. But then the connection to some kind of, because we are persons. I'm not saying God is a person, but since I am a person, I can only experience God as a person. I live in the middle of the forest. The forest is not a person, but I have a personal relationship with it. because I'm a person. The only kind of relationship I can have with the forest is, as a person. So I have a personal relationship with it. My dog Kayla, before she died, she wasn't a human person, but I had a personal relationship with her because I'm a person. So God is not a person, but I'm a person, and therefore the relationship I have with God can only be a personal relationship. So at some level, there needs to be some kind of a storyline that accommodates my being a person in contact with origin. So I think then we have to be very careful about how we establish what's really successful. Vipassana is going to take me into full awareness itself, personless, contentless consciousness, which is great. But if I need a God figure with whom I can be personally involved or with whom I can fall in love, another style of meditation is going to be, quote unquote, better. Yeah.
Thank you for your very helpful teaching. A quick question. If you can recall earlier in your homily, my mind was wandering, I apologize, what God said to Peter.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So this was a story that you find in the Acts of the Apostles in chapter 10. And the background is that the Jesus movement has just started. Jesus is dead, he's resurrected, he's ascended. The young church is on its own. They're trying to figure out what the hell are we going to do now. So they have no idea. They're all Jewish. They're fixated on Torah, 613 precepts, the law is the law is the law, and there's clean food and there's treif, and there's the Sabbath day and there's the other days of the week, and there's the circumcised and the uncircumcised. So there's all these kinds of separations. And one day Peter goes up onto the roof of his house, they're flat roofs, and he's having a siesta. But he's meditating and he has this vision. And in this vision, a sheet is let down from heaven. And there are all kinds of animals crawling around inside in it, clean and unclean. And a voice says to him, Peter, take and eat. And Peter says, oh, God forbid. I've kept kosher all my life. There's no way I'm going to eat these creepy crawlies. And the sheet is taken back up. And it's repeated a second time. And he's told, take and eat. Peter says, no, I keep kosher. And it's taken back up. And it comes down a third time and says, take and eat. Peter says, no, I'm kosher. I keep kosher. And the voice says, Peter, do not call anything I have created unclean. Now, the object of the exercise was not that he would go out and eat a piece of pork, but that the voice was saying to him, this is a message not intended just for Jews. This is a message for all humankind. And therefore, this Jesus movement is not about, just only visiting the homes of Jewish people. So the very same chapter, Peter goes into the house of a centurion, a Roman centurion, and he begins telling people about the Jesus movement. And all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit comes down, and the Gentiles begin speaking in tongues. And the people who came with Jesus, oh my God, look at this. The Holy Spirit is coming down on them just as it came down on us. How can we refuse them baptism now that they've been touched by the Holy Spirit? So these guys actually got confirmed before they got baptized. And that totally changed the whole trajectory of the Jesus movement. Thereafter, they realized this is not a Jewish movement. This is a global movement. So it was a meditation experience that radically changed, the course of human history. Yeah, welcome. I think Ria was next.
I think that this is really a comment on, can you hear me?
Yes.
Really on my own experiences, because I did transcendental meditation at university and I continued it for a while, and for some reason I stopped. But one thing I found with transcendental meditation is they actually didn't particularly teach you how to. You were given a mantra, yeah. Right? And that was that, and you weren't actually really given any benefits. So I have tried to meditate on and off over the years, but as my mind has got too busy and my brain has got even bigger than it was, and I've got so many thoughts. When somebody asks me to meditate, I can literally go away with the fairies myself. So anyway, for my Christmas, my sister gave me this app for a year called Headspace, which is a meditation online. And it is actually by, it's an English person, he does it all, but he was a Buddhist monk for a number of years at many monasteries. And for him, this is like meditation 101. It really, the first time you only do it for 3 minutes, and you do it every day. And within about 4 days, I noticed a difference in me. And now I'm doing it I'm now on to my 17th day. But every time you're told to, you close your eyes. He as I get on, he talks less and less. you know, in the meditation. But this is like, so for me, this is a really good starting point than then going off into, do I want to do this kind of meditation? Do I want to do that kind of meditation? Because you really have to learn how to just be at one with yourself and not wonder about all those things floating in the river, which can sometimes be quite interesting, you know, that you talked about. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant, Ria, brilliant. So let me just add to that a little bit. I mean, one of the great values of modern technology is that technology can literally assist spiritual development. Now, when you look at human evolution, there was a stage in human life where the first technology simply amplified human muscle. So instead of the digging stick where we're trying to plow a field, we invented the ox-drawn plow. So you've totally amplified human musculature. You can dig a whole swath of land that you couldn't do before. Same with the bow and arrow. You know, you could throw a spear maybe to the end of the room. You develop a bow and arrow and you can send it, 150 yards. So the first kind of technology was the amplification of human muscles. The second kind of technology was the amplification of the human sensorium. So we learned, for instance, we invented telescopes. We could see, to Mars. We put help people to hear. Hearing aids help people better. So we started amplifying human sensorium. That was the second wave of technology. The third wave of technology was we amplified human cognition. We invented calculators, and then we invented computers, which have extraordinary memory capacities, and can do a whole bunch of tasks. So they help us with our computational skills and our cognitive processes. And the fourth stage of technology, I believe, is precisely what you're saying. There are apps out there right now which are helping people in their spiritual evolution. Now, there's a lot of apps which are a disaster, as much as, there are weapons of mass destruction that came with former stages of human development. But there are always values to be found in human technology. And I agree totally with you, Ria. There's technology available very simply on your iPhone right now, where literally you can amplify your spiritual journey. You can learn to meditate probably in 17 days instead of spending 14 years in a monastery learning drills. Thanks for that contribution. Before we continue with our Eucharist, let's offer each other a sign of our peace.